This is Monocle on Fashion, the show on Monocle Radio, bringing you global perspectives and nuanced conversation to the world of fashion and style. I'm Sophie Grove, editor of Confect, Monocle's sister publication, sitting in for Natalie Theodosi. On today's programme, following a headline-making couture week, we speak with Women's Wear Daily's Joelle Diderich about the collections raising questions over what couture is for.
So if you're not showing any actual clothes, are you still allowed to call it couture?
Then I'm joined by Brenda Toohey, Monocle's luxury markets editor, to discuss the high jewels accompanying couture.
You don't just want a ring, you want the earrings, the necklace, and perhaps, if it's not too much, the bracelet.
And we finished with one of the most recognisable names in luxury footwear, Christian Louboutin CEO Alexis Mourot, on how the brand is evolving.
2 years ago, 70% of the collection was 10 centimeters and above. Now it's 70% is below 10 centimeters in terms of high heel.
That's all ahead, here on Monocle on Fashion. Couture Fashion Week occupies an amorphous space within the fashion business. Is it a showcase for an elite form of dressmaking, or a theatre for spectacle and brand marketing? Those questions surface every season, but this year designers seem especially keen to make a case for what their couture represents. Joelle Diderich, Women's Wear Daily's Paris bureau chief, was at the shows and joined Monocle on Fashion's producer Lily Austin to tell us more.
People use the term couture very kind of fast and loose, but it actually refers to something super specific, which is making made-to-measure clothes. And it's a highly regulated industry. It exists only in Paris. And so there's probably only about a dozen houses that do it. So compared to a normal fashion week, you're dealing with a much smaller number of players. And then what they do is they invite young people to come into the calendar as well as guests to just kind of keep it fresh. Otherwise, it's a bit a legacy craft that is in danger of becoming dusty and dying. So we're looking at the top of the top end, and, you know, the bar is super high. So when you go to a couture show, you're really, really going in there with an expectation that your mind will be blown.
On that note, let's talk about some of the collections from this past week. So for a couple of big designer debuts with Mathieu Blazy at Chanel and Jonathan Anderson at Dior. Let's start with Chanel. What did you make of the collection?
So Chanel was obviously so highly anticipated, and just the moment you walked into the venue, it was this kind of super psychedelic set with giant mushrooms on it. And it was a grey and rainy day, so I have to say, already from the get-go, it was just sparking joy, for me at least. Pink is my favourite colour. It was wall-to-wall pink carpeting, so I could not have been more well-disposed for this show. And then what Mathieu Blazy did was quite daring, because he did not do, you know, these spectacular big dresses, this kind of statement that you might have expected. He went super, super quiet, and his first look was so quiet as to be almost like an X-ray or a memory of a Chanel suit, because it was all done in see-through chiffon. And people online didn't quite get it. I have to say, if you had the privilege of getting in any way up close and personal with any of these clothes, the techniques, the craftsmanship would just blow you away, because the amount of work that goes into weaving these kind of tweed-like fabrics with feathers coming off them, just even a black look made out of raffia, which is not a material that you normally see in couture because it's kind of a humble material, but that black coat with the flowers made out of raffia, all of it was just mind-blowing. And so where the disconnect comes in, I think, and where people maybe didn't get it, is that he's designing for the client. And he's going back to what Coco Chanel did, which is back in the day, there was no ready-to-wear. So you only had a couture service if you had that level of budget. And Coco Chanel would dress you for lunch, for all your daytime activities, for maybe going to the horse races. and going to a gala. She would do your full wardrobe. And he said, well, I want to go back to that. And looking at that black trouser suit that he did, for me, it's always been my fantasy, if I ever win the lottery and I can go and dress at a couture house, I would love to get a perfect black suit made for me. That to me is just the ultimate in luxury. And that's what he's talking about. So, it was really, really interesting to see that brought back into the conversation. And at the same time, he's addressing the need for escape that we do go to couture for by making this set so incredible. And the references in the clothes was all birds, and it's about nature, it's about taking a breath, it's about pausing from the stress and anxiety of the news cycle and just going to a beautiful, poetic, quiet place. And so I thought that was really amazing.
So when you say a disconnect, do you think that there is this expectation now that couture is about doing something that's closer to spectacle for the audience rather than being mainly a product to be bought by a very exclusive customer?
Absolutely. I probably shouldn't be giving away my age like this, but I started covering couture 25 years ago. And, back in those days, the clients were there at the shows, the people like Nan Kempner and Danielle Steele, and, they were the ones in the front row. And then what you saw as those ladies, were no longer around, you saw couture becoming primarily a vehicle for image making and selling a lot of perfumes. And so all the brands turned it into basically a great advertising platform. Of course, the clients are still there, but it's not exactly the same as it used to be, in maybe even as recently as 25 years ago. So to have someone state that now and go back to that purpose of couture, I think it does stick out. It was quite a daring statement on his part. And people online are saying, how is this couture? Even for his ready-to-wear show, I saw people commenting, oh, this is Zara. Believe me, if you've touched it, if you've looked at it, if that's Zara, I want to know which Zara you're shopping at, because I'll be going there myself. It is most definitely not high street. So but it's not made to wow you on, your phone in the tiny format of an Instagram photo or reel. It's made to wow you when you touch it and you wear it.
Well, with Jonathan Anderson at Dior, I feel like that he's gone a kind of the other way, because there were some really striking shapes and silhouettes in this collection. What did you make of it as someone who was in the audience?
He did something super clever, which is that it wasn't just a runway show, it was a sequence of events, some of which are for the public and some of which are for the clients. So yes, the shapes that we saw on the runway were definitely quite daring and experimental. And it goes back to that other purpose of couture that designers always talk about, which is it's a laboratory for experimentation. So it allows you to go quite extreme with certain ideas that may then actually filter their way through into the ready-to-wear collections. So, he obviously did the skirts with the sort of bulbous belly in front, the pod shapes, things where you would have trouble projecting yourself into. But then in the evening, they took over a whole villa called Villa Dior in Paris, and it was filled with all the runway looks, but also a whole extra collection for clients, which was actually much more wearable in terms of the shapes, but still couture. And they had all these amazing bags and jewelry and all different products. And so it catered to both the public appetite and thirst for spectacle and the client's need for something practical to wear.
So maybe he nailed that contradiction a little better than Chanel, at least for the people at home watching. I wanted to ask you about Alexis Mourot, because he also has got a lot of headlines for his collection yesterday. Will you tell us about that?
So yeah, I mean, Alexis Mabille didn't tell anyone that he was going to be not showing any clothes this season. It was all done via AI, and it was AI clothes on AI models. So you definitely had the feeling sitting in the show that people were feeling a bit discombobulated. And then, coming out of it, the question is, well, is that allowed? Not in the sense of, creatively, because obviously anything is allowed. You can just do what you want as a designer. But because, as I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, couture is so tightly regulated. And, you have rules about how many people you have to employ, how many looks you show per season, all that kind of thing. So if you're not showing any actual clothes, are you still allowed to call it couture? So for now, there's a debate about that. We'll have to see how it pans out. Will he go back to doing a more traditional runway show next season? That's sort of what people are thinking about now. From what I understand, his show was still quite labor intensive because it took, he said, up to 300 passes per outfit to get it to look realistic. So it's not like he was cutting corners and he was just doing it as a quick fix. And he was scanning the fabrics and had his atelier seamstresses giving feedback to the people doing the prompting about how certain things should look and catch the light and all that. So it's a lot of work, but when it's made to measure clothes, when it's the highest level of personalization, what does it mean if you're doing it all on the virtual runway?
What was it like watching a screen rather than seeing a model in a 3D real outfit?
I think, part of your brain is going, oh, that's actually quite realistic, that's pretty well done. And then another part of your brain is looking for the glitches. So sometimes you'd see the model's eyes would suddenly go a little bit glitchy, or the people in the virtual audience, their faces would start, or their hands would start glitching. So yeah, I think there's a lot of, your brain is kind of whizzing trying to understand what it's looking at, and it's quite disconcerting, and it's also quite impressive because one of the models, I was like, oh, I love her haircut, I really want hair like that, and I'm like, oh, but she doesn't exist. So not very healthy really for me to aspire to look like something that is just a pure figment of the imagination.
I mean, it's a pretty bold move to make that choice because I feel like AI so far is mostly associated with cheap imitations and something to create something mass, the opposite of luxury. So what do you think his motivation was with making a collection this way?
Well, he has the whole other business where he does interior design. Like he's done Caviar Caspia restaurants, and, he does hotels and other projects like that. So he was, I think, inspired by two things. One is that, now you do these virtual walkthroughs when you design a project for interior design. And then secondly, he said that a lot of his clients are asking to see things remotely. They don't want to have to come to Paris and, do the fittings. And so it's a way that he can get their measurements and he can send them a simulation of what the outfit might look like for them. Make of that what you will. I mean, what I do know is that he wasn't using the AI to generate the design. And I think that's a very important distinction. He was telling the AI the final result that he wanted it to produce. So he already had the design before, and he was using the AI to communicate the design and to broadcast the design. So it's a little bit different than when you're saying, put the Pope in a Balenciaga puffer coat,
Hmm. Well, we kind of touched on it a little bit, the question of the relevance of couture in kind of the broader fashion industry. What do you think of this week? Do you think it made a case for these different kind of innovations? Did it make a case for the couture's enduring relevance to the industry?
Yeah, I think the real takeaway for me this week was just couture's power to make you dream. And, I think we all need a little bit of escape right now. And so you had, for example, these almost alien-like scorpion women at Schiaparelli. You had the beautiful flower women at Dior. You had the beautiful bird women at Chanel. And I love the Valentino show because I love film and I love film history. And it was all about these 1920s, 1930s film icons and just that sensation of, when you're watching an oldie and you're just completely disappearing into another world. So I think that couture continues to send us very strong messages about brand identity. Each of these brands, in their own way, is telling us something important about their brand promise with these shows. And they're also functioning as entertainment for what it's worth, because I think that's a whole other debate is, with fashion becoming increasingly entertainment and at the same time luxury sales slowing, what is it that luxury brands are finally selling? Images don't pay the rent. So, but with that said, they are sending us very strong messages and very strong images that will then filter through into our perception of everything else that they do, whether that's a cafe with their brand on it, or whether it's a perfume, or whether it's a handbag. It all ties together.
That was Joelle Diderich, Paris Bureau Chief at Women's Wear Daily, in conversation with Monocle on Fashion's producer, Lily Austin. Now, to go a little deeper into couture and the jewellery that completes it, I'm joined by Brenda Toohey, Monocle's luxury markets editor. Hello.
Hi, Sophie.
You've been back only recently in London from your travels in Paris, and I was there too. Not really.
Together.
We didn't cross paths at all.
No, crazy. Well, I was looking at jewellery and you were looking at haute couture.
I know they're quite different, but then seemingly it's, what I loved about Paris last week was just the sense that haute couture and jewellery just took over the whole city.
Yeah.
There were traffic jams outside the Grand Palais. It rained relentlessly. And so there were the people kind of in these amazing tweeds going into the Chanel show, just drenched with umbrellas, people running hither and thither. And I just felt like it really stopped the traffic. And Paris is kind of nonchalant about that. They'll do it for couture.
There were women running around in couture dresses at some of the jewellery parties I was at. And the dresses were breathtaking, but the jewellery was just exquisite, outstanding, and like haute couture, one-off.
Well, that's interesting. So the jewellery is kind of in tandem. It's a sort of parallel event. But give us a sense of how the houses present the high jewellery. And is there a sense of spectacle and unveiling? Is there a kind of wonderful party circuit that I've been missing out on all this time?
Yeah, there's all of that. The big houses, the Bulgaris, the Grafs, De Beers, Chaumet, all show the most wonderful jewellery. You have a one-on-one appointment. It's you, a member from the big house, and then they bring out the trays of all the big rocks for you to just drool over. They really are gorgeous. At David Morris, I encountered a Padparacha sapphire from Sri Lanka. Very, very rare. Normally they're peachy in color. I've seen quite a few of those. But this was a shocking pink. It was ginormous as well. Now, David Morris is known really for his colored diamonds. He has jewelry with diamonds that are red, orange, yellow, green, blue, even purple, and pink. Just fabulous colored diamonds. But this was pretty special. And in addition to the Padparacha sapphire, he had another ring with the second largest natural pearl in existence in the world. And when I asked where that was from, I was simply told it was from their personal collection.
No provenance. Which bit of which ocean, which
I know.
wonderful watery backdrop are we to imagine?
I mean, this was ginormous. This was bigger. Well, it was veering on golf ball size, It was very, very big. It was beautiful, really. And the colored diamonds that surrounded it mirrored all the different hues that were visible in that pearl. It's a little bit of gray. There was pink. There was a sort of a bronze. It was really, really, really special. Just divine.
And in terms of design, I think it's interesting to kind of get a sense of some of the really one-off sort of, compositions that you've been seeing. Who really struck you in terms of, that sense of creativity and jewelry this time round?
Dior sort of broke the mold. They had a lot of tassels with fabulous stones, but they were bold in a different, more romantic way. So there were tassels. The stones were smaller. There were many more of them. The labor-intensive, beautiful grids that they created, whether it was fringes or a lattice, were really special. You could see that craftsmanship there. And the Les Perles bezel shape, which is, if you could imagine, you know what a bobbin leg looks like on a table? All the little balls all kind of stuck together. Well, that's how the bezels were at Dior. So every little piece was very, very intricate. Lots of different colored diamonds also shining, but quite special. What I did notice, of course, in a lot of these big houses when they're doing their high jewelry, is that the parure, the matching set, is really, really popular. You don't just want a ring, you want the earrings, the necklace, the ring, and perhaps, if it's not too much, the bracelet.
And possibly a brooch.
Oh, gosh, yes, I'm forgetting the brooch, which nobody talked about for years, and now it's really back, bang on trend. I mean, we all need a brooch. You're wearing a brooch today, Sophie Grove.
I am, and I think it's quite interesting. Certainly at Chanel, I've seen there's lots of malleable pieces of high jewelry, so you can wear it as a brooch. Then you might wear it as a necklace or a pendant. And I think that's quite nice, just to give it a bit of kind of dexterity to the pieces.
It's very old school. At Chaumet, that was also in play, where your tiara might be turned into a brooch, or perhaps a collar, or two bangles. So they had wonderful enamel, beautiful enamel, really incredible, all in shades of blue. It was fantastic. But what was also amazing was the science behind some of it. When I went to visit De Beers, they showed me a wall made out of kimberlite. And kimberlite is the material that after the earthquake, that the stones, in particular the diamonds, travel in to move up towards the earth, towards the surface of the earth. Not that close, though, because you have to actually mine for them. And that in itself was just the most wonderful material I'd ever seen.
I must say, De Beers are doing quite a good job educating us all.
Weren't they?
Like doing a geography GCSE, because every time they had an amazing installation at Frieze Masters, and I was in there for hours scribbling notes down, cosmic diamonds, this amazing sense of, their connection with Africa and just the earth, the kind of origin of diamonds and things. They really want you to know exactly how this all works.
Yes.
So you feel very kind of informed.
Some people think that jewelry is quite frivolous and, just a form of adornment. But jewelry really connects us, and gemstones and gold, to the earth. That is where they come from. These are eternal bits of material that humans polish and, design and create something maybe a little more interesting. But the rough stones are beautiful too. But they are pieces of the earth. They are eternal. They will go on much longer than you or me, I fear.
And tell me, this season has been a really interesting sort of musical chairs of creative directors in the fashion world. And Mathieu Blasy's first couture show was remarkable, and I was there, luckily, to see it in this incredible sort of like wonderland of sort of Lewis Carroll-inspired mushrooms and pink willow trees and things as the set. I just wondered, in terms of creative directors behind some of the jewelry brands, is there a similar sense of movement, and who really stands out for you as a really distinguished and interesting, maybe new creative director or someone who's been at the helm for a while but's just doing interesting things?
Claire Schwann at Boucheron is always fantastic. In January, she looks back at Boucheron's archives, at Frédéric's own designs, and she recreates them in a new and modern way, using the codes of the house, but in a modern sense. She had 4 particular pieces of jewelry that she showed us, 3 necklaces, and then the 4th, they were sleeves. So Frédéric Boucheron had, I suppose in the late 1800s, created sleeves made out of gold and stones, and she had recreated them. They were almost like epaulettes in their style, but how stunning, how unusual, how modern. Diamonds cascading over the shoulders.
I love the way she works in her study in Place Vendôme, which was chosen specifically by Boucheron for its kind of amazing light that filters through from the piazza outside. And I think she has this kind of carte blanche approach to her designs, as well as doing some heritage work, which I really love because it's actually quite punchy. Sometimes she's using titanium and some really wacky and beautiful sculptures, wearable sculptures, really.
Their presentation is also unusual. You're invited, it's a 45-minute presentation, but you're invited into a completely pitch black vestibule. So you are standing there with other people in total darkness. And really, that does alter your mind state and your vision. And then the door opens into another darkened room where the jewelry suddenly lights up. So your senses are very heightened. So really, high jewels, in the case of Boucheron and Dior, it's not even just about the jewels. It's about the presentation and the delivery.
Well, Brenda, thank you so much for bringing those to life for us. And it's such a dazzling, twinkling week you've had.
I really have. I was a little bit disappointed when I got back to my jewelry box.
I don't think we should even begin to compare it to my jewelry box. Monocle's luxury markets editor, thank you for joining me. And finally, we finish in Abu Dhabi, a city making an increasingly confident bid to rival Paris as a capital of luxury. One part of that push is the inaugural Shop Talk Luxe, bringing brands and tech players together to discuss the future of premium retail. Among the most recognisable names in the room was Christian Louboutin, synonymous with the red-soled heel. Monocle's golf correspondent Inzaman Rashid sat down with the brand's CEO, Alexis Mourot, and began by asking why Abu Dhabi could be the future of luxury retail.
Globally in Abu Dhabi, it's a place that I've been coming for many, many years, but I was just coming on a day trip. Now it's like, I think it's time to stay. There's so much offering. I think the Minister of Culture and Tourism, the name of His Excellency is Mohammed
Al-Mubarak.
Yes, Al-Mubarak is doing a fantastic job, really, really strong job. So, and he's bringing so many museums, so many things, that are complementary to Dubai, that I feel like it's a place that's very important. Again, culture and tourism.
What does it mean for you, for Christian Louboutin to be here, to have a presence here? And also, the market is pretty obsessed with you guys back in Europe as well. No. The GCC market is obsessed with you in Europe. So how important is it having a presence here?
I mean, we got a presence with our partner, Chaloub, for more like probably 16, 17 years, So it's such an important market, and we have a lot of really strong customers. So we're looking at making sure that, we address the market quite well. So we're not looking at a huge expansion, but we're making sure that, we have the product for the customer. So we have changed also our product structure that before, 2 years ago, 70% of the collection was 10 centimeters and above. Now it's 70% is below 10 centimeters in terms of high heel.
I want to talk specifically about the company overall now, even just away from the region. What is it that Christian, yourself, the team are doing to remain fresh, to remain relevant? Obviously, the company is steeped in history, it's steeped in tradition as well. But what do you do day in, day out to remain relevant and to keep up to date?
Sure. I mean, we are very lucky to have a founder. So one of the few last one, we're still the founder in the company. And the founder, created so many things, such as the red sole. Also, he established the stiletto. So what is important for us is that, yes, we're looking at growth to become like a lifestyle global, accessory brand. But what we should not do is to dilute, this message, or the core DNA. So our job is to, yes, grow, to expand the company, but with a certain, control.
Because I was going to ask about that. At the end of the day, your core product is a shoe, and you are doing a lot more than shoes now. But how do you not get distracted away from delivering on that core product? Is that still very much at the heart of everything Christian Louboutin does?
Yeah, I mean, we think that there is a lot of actually credibility in doing other things, other categories, but we're careful on selecting each categories. If the category do not make sense, about 5 pillars that we have, we're not moving.
Final question, you've got Jaden Smith who's come on board.
Yes.
Tell me a bit about the decision behind that, because I think it was maybe a bit of a shock to some people to see that happen.
Yes.
But you're doubling down. It's the right decision for the brand.
I mean, we love that it's a shock, because that was the point, We're not going, we do things differently in Christian Louboutin. So, but first I told, it's a chemistry between him and Christian, very important. Christian and Jaden have been knowing each other for quite a long time. So it's kind of natural. When Christian thought about having, a designer, he thought about Jaden. Number two, we think he's very talented, but wait, his story will tell us.
What will he bring? What will he bring to the table?
Freshness, fresh ideas, a different world also, looking at sustainability, which is important, and also a world on music that is important and always part of the DNA of the
And
company.
you think he gets it? He gets the brand? He understands Christian?
We think he gets, but give him some time, because it will take time.
That was Alexis Mourot, CEO of Christian Louboutin, speaking with Monocle's Gulf correspondent Inzaman Rashid. And that's it for today's programme. Join us next week for more Fashion Week dispatches and in-depth interviews. This episode was produced and edited by Lily Austin. I'm Sophie Grove. Thanks for listening.